They're asking for me now? After vanishing me for nearly a decade? I just stood there, staring at the gray wall in my one-bedroom apartment in Jersey City, phone still in my hand, screen glowing with Nate, my cousin, the only one who ever kept my number. 5 years of silence, and suddenly he was calling like we'd spoken yesterday. "Hey, man," he said after I finally answered, voice low, hesitant. "They want you home. For Christmas." I didn't say anything. Not right away. I looked out the window at the streetlights flickering in the freezing wind, trying to feel something. Anything. But mostly I felt like I'd been shoved into a time machine. Like I was back in that house again. The one I left behind in 2016 after my parents made it painfully clear I wasn't family material. "You still there?" Nate asked. "Yeah," I said, my voice flat. He cleared his throat. "They said it's time. They miss you." I scoffed without meaning to. 8 years, I said. "They missed me for 8 years, and now it's time? They're different now. I think they're trying at least." He sounded like even he didn't believe it. "Your mom asked me to reach out. She didn't have your new number. She never asked for it before." I know. I could hear him breathing through the phone. Could almost picture him pacing outside his office in Pennsylvania, one hand on his hip, looking up at the sky like that would help him say something better. Nate had always been the decent one, the only one who saw me. "They want you home for Christmas," he repeated. "Just think about it." I didn't answer. After we hung up, I sat down on the edge of the couch, still holding the phone. My living room was small couch, coffee table, and a fake tree I'd half-decorated 3 nights ago before losing interest. A candle burned on the windowsill. Vanilla bean. It smelled like nothing back home ever had. They want me home. 8 years ago, I left that house with nothing but a duffel bag and a laptop. Brielle, my sister, the golden child, stood on the porch and didn't even wave. My parents said I wasn't cut out for the family's values, whatever that meant. I knew exactly what it meant, though. It meant Brielle got the praise, the support, the smile when she walked into a room. I got ignored, corrected, or reminded I was lucky they even let me stay after 18. I built a life without them. A damn good one. Better than I ever thought I could, if I'm being honest. I paid off my student loans before 30, got promoted, bought a duplex, and now they want to act like it never happened? I leaned forward, elbows on knees, staring at the floor like the answers would be there. Part of me wanted to go, just to look them in the eye and show them who I became. Not to gloat, not even to forgive, just to exist in front of them and make them feel it. Another part of me thought about all the years I begged for their attention, their approval, and got silence in return. That part didn't want to give them a damn thing. But Nate had asked, and Nate didn't ask for much. So I picked up the phone again and opened a new message. "I'll think about it." I hit send, then sat back and waited for the past to come knocking. When I was 13, my parents thought I was broken, quiet, withdrawn, always in my room. So they sent me to a shrink, Dr. Cooper. His office smelled like peppermints and dust. He wore corduroy blazers and always had one of those squishy stress balls in his hand. We met for 3 months, every Tuesday after school. I didn't say much at first, just sat on the leather couch while he asked the usual questions. How's school? How's home? How's your sister? He always brought up Brielle. Eventually, I cracked, told him the truth. She gets everything. I don't even get noticed. When the sessions ended, he called my parents in and told them, "Your son isn't isolated. He's ignored." I remember my mom's face when he said that. Tight-lipped smile, the same one she used when the neighbor kids misbehaved in front of her. My dad just nodded like he was waiting for a golf commercial to come on. "We praise both our kids equally," my mom said. "We always have." That was a lie. And I think Dr. Cooper knew it. That winter, Brielle turned 16. She got a white Jetta with a red bell on the hood. I got a used winter coat from Goodwill, 2 sizes too big and missing a button. I didn't complain. I didn't even react. By then, I had learned not to expect much. Holidays were the worst. Our family wasn't big on warmth, but they loved appearances. Christmas was always a parade of Brielle's achievements. Honor roll, captain of the debate team, perfect teeth. She'd sit at the head of the table, twirling her fork while everyone asked about college applications. My uncle once said, "She's got it all: brains, charm, looks." Then turned to me and said, "And you're good with computers, right?" That was the role I played. The background character with the Wi-Fi password. So I found a way out. Not physically, not yet, but mentally, emotionally, even spiritually. High school coding club became my escape hatch. It was the only place where I mattered. There, I wasn't Brielle's little brother. I was just Nate, the kid who could fix a broken line of JavaScript in under a minute. The kid who stayed late to help build a rudimentary game engine while the others ran to Taco Bell. Mr. Schaefer, the club advisor, once told me, "You've got something most kids don't. You see patterns." He didn't mean it as a throwaway compliment. He meant it. And for once, I believed it. Junior year, I started entering coding competitions online under a fake name. Built a chatbot that won second place in a regional tech challenge. Nobody at school even knew. At home, I kept my wins quiet. Brielle was busy getting interviewed by local news for some volunteer project she half-assed at the community center. I kept my head down, kept building. By senior year, I had a full portfolio. I secretly applied to NYU's computer engineering program without telling anyone. The day I got my acceptance letter, full ride, housing included, I didn't say a word. I just folded it neatly and tucked it into the back of my closet, behind some old comic books no one ever touched. I wasn't trying to be dramatic. I just knew what would happen if I shared it. They'd smile politely, maybe say that's nice, before going back to asking Brielle about her spring formal dress. They never saw me. Not really, but I saw something they didn't. A way out. A future they couldn't control or dismiss. A door they didn't even know existed, and one I'd already started walking through. And I didn't plan on looking back. I left home with $40, a backpack, and a Metro card. That was it. NYU gave me a full ride, but that didn't cover late-night hunger, busted headphones, or the 1,000 small things that add up fast when you're trying to stay afloat in New York City. So I worked overnight security at one of the old admin buildings, 12 to 8. Most nights were quiet, a janitor mopping, a professor grading late. I'd sit at the desk, laptop open, running test builds of my latest code while sipping gas station coffee. No one back home knew. My parents thought I was going to community college. Brielle once asked if I was still messing around with that little computer hobby. That was the last time we spoke. I didn't correct them. I didn't need them to understand. I just needed them out of my way. For years later, I graduated in the top 2% of my class. I walked across the stage in a wrinkled rented gown, shook the dean's hand, and stood under the NYU arch with my diploma in one hand and an unpaid parking ticket in the other. No family photos. No applause. Just me and a friend from the dorm who clapped and said, "You did it, man. You really did it." That was enough. After graduation, I got hired by a fintech security firm in Soho. Entry-level, but the pay wasn't bad. I kept my head down, learned fast, and volunteered for the late-night shifts no one wanted. My boss noticed. Within 6 months, I was writing security patches for Fortune 500 clients. By year 2, I was leading a small integration team. By year 3, I was the one negotiating contracts. The big moment came last spring. A European bank had a massive back-end breach. My firm pitched them a custom protocol, one I designed over 3 sleepless weekends and a bottle of bottom-shelf whiskey. The deal closed for $9.2 million. My cut? A $138,000 post-tax bonus. I stared at the direct deposit screen like it was a hallucination. Then I did the one thing I swore I'd do when I made it. I bought a duplex in Hoboken. Brick exterior, clean lines, big windows, 2 floors, one to live in, one to rent out. The kid who wasn't good enough just bought a damn duplex. I stood in the empty kitchen on move-in day, keys in hand, and didn't even smile. Not because I wasn't proud, but because there was no one to share it with. No one who'd believe it if I told them. 2 weeks later, Nate called again. "Hey," he said, "they want you home for Christmas." It had been 8 years. "They know where I live now?" I asked. He laughed, kind of sadly. "They didn't ask. Just said they wanted to invite you. Thought it was time." I looked around my new kitchen. Everything smelled like fresh paint and quiet success. My fridge had real food in it. My name was on the deed. "You going?" Nate asked. I didn't answer right away. I could feel something tightening in my chest. Not anger, not even hurt, just something unfinished. Like a page in a book I never flipped back to. "I'll think about it," I finally said. And I did. Not because I needed their approval. That ship sailed a long time ago. But because somewhere deep down, I wanted to walk into that house and let them see the person they never believed I could be. Not for revenge, not even for closure. Just to prove, once and for all, that I was never the screw-up. I was just the one they refused to see. The paint was still peeling. Same faded shutters, same crooked welcome mat. I stood on the sidewalk outside my parents' house, holding a duffel bag in one hand and a bottle of red wine I'd picked up out of sheer obligation in the other. The front steps were cracked again. I guess no one ever fixed them. Brielle's white SUV was in the driveway. She always did love making an entrance. The porch light flicked on. Then the door creaked open. My mom stood there in a red Christmas sweater with tiny bells stitched into the collar. She blinked like I was a ghost. "You look different," she said. I stepped onto the porch. "I eat now," I replied. "And sleep." She didn't laugh, just stepped aside so I could walk in. The living room was packed. Warm lights, clinking glasses, the faint smell of turkey, and too much cinnamon. Aunts, uncles, second cousins I hadn't seen since high school. The moment I stepped inside, the noise dropped. Just a little. like the room inhaled and forgot to exhale. "Hey," someone said, too cheerfully. "Look who decided to show up." I gave a small nod, unsure if I should smile. Everyone else just went back to their conversations like I was a guest they didn't quite remember inviting. "You want a drink?" my mom asked. "I'm good." I scanned the room. The furniture hadn't changed. Same scratched coffee table, same recliner where Dad always fell asleep mid-football game. On the far wall, a photo collage, mostly Brielle. Prom, graduation, her and her husband on a boat somewhere tropical. I didn't see a single picture of me. Brielle made her entrance 10 minutes later, walking in like she owned the place. She was glowing, cheeks flushed, hair perfect, and pregnant. Her husband trailed behind her with a goofy smile, one hand on her lower back like he was guiding royalty through a crowd. "Look who's here," she said, spotting me. Her tone wasn't warm, more like she'd spotted a fly on the tablecloth. "Hey, Brielle," I said. "Oh my God, you look different," she said. The exact same words as Mom. "Yeah." I stopped getting ignored. "It's done wonders." She blinked, then smiled like she hadn't heard it. Dad walked in from the kitchen carrying a plate of stuffing. He gave me a once-over and said, "Well, look at you. Still tall, huh?" That was it. No hug. No, "We missed you." Just a back pat like I'd helped him move a couch. "You'll be sleeping on the recliner," he added over his shoulder. "Brielle's using your room for the nursery." I stared at him for a second. Of course she is. He didn't hear me, or pretended not to. Later, I stood by the window, sipping flat ginger ale, watching Brielle soak up the attention. Everyone hovered near her, hands on her belly, offering advice and compliments she soaked up like sunlight. Her husband talked about their house renovation like he was rebuilding the White House. Every time someone asked what I'd been up to, I gave the same answer. Work. Life. Nothing exciting. No one asked follow-ups. No one asked where I lived, what I did, if I was happy. It was like I had walked in wearing invisibility. By dessert, I was already checking my watch. "You good?" Nate asked, sidling up beside me. His eyes were kind, honest, the only real ones in the room. "Yeah," I said. "This is about what I expected." "They're trying," he offered. "Are they?" He didn't answer. I looked around one more time, at the people I used to know, at the walls that never saw me, at the sister who took up every inch of space in every room we ever shared, and realized something. I wasn't here to be welcomed. I wasn't here for closure, or forgiveness, or even recognition. I came back to face the past, and after tonight, I wouldn't owe it a damn thing. They parked me next to the trash can. Literally. My seat at the dinner table was wedged between the kitchen door and a tall bin with a foot pedal. Every time someone threw something away, I caught a whiff of stuffing and plastic wrap and whatever else didn't make the cut. I didn't complain. I just folded my napkin, rested my hands in my lap, and kept my face neutral. Brielle sat dead center, of course, surrounded by glowing relatives like a holiday version of a celebrity press junket. Her belly barely touched the table, and her husband never left her side. He poured her sparkling cider like it was champagne and told the same story twice about how their baby kicked during a TED Talk podcast. The rest of the family ate it up like it was gospel. I mostly pushed mashed potatoes around my plate and listened. Then came the main event. "So," Brielle said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, "I have some exciting news." Mom clapped before she even finished the sentence. Dad perked up, mouthful of ham. "I've been working on something," Brielle continued. "A business plan." "Tell them, sweetheart," her husband added, like a stage dad whispering cues. "I'm launching a startup," she said, beaming. "It's called Mom Genie, an app for new parents that streamlines baby care, sleep tracking, feeding schedules. Think of it like Alexa, but for moms." "Ooh," Aunt Cindy said. "That sounds so innovative." Uncle Rob leaned over his plate. "How much are you asking for?" Brielle laughed lightly, like she'd rehearsed. "We're looking to raise about $250,000 in seed funding. Just enough to build the prototype, test the user base, and hire a small dev team." I blinked. Slowly, Dad nodded. "We'll figure it out. Family supports family." The words hit like a slap. Brielle glanced toward me, just for a second. Not directly, more like someone checking if the vending machine had restocked. "Of course," she said, "we'd love to keep it in the family." My fork paused halfway to my mouth. There it was. The real reason they wanted me back. Not for Christmas. Not for closure. For cash. "I know you've been doing well," Brielle said, her voice syrupy. "Nate said you bought a place in Hoboken?" "Duplex," I said flatly. "Wow," she said. "That's amazing." A few heads turned my way like I'd just spoken for the first time in hours. Uncle Rob chuckled. "Well, hey, maybe you can invest. You know computers, right?" That got a few laughs. Polite, empty ones. Like my existence was still a running family gag. I took a sip of my drink. Swallowed slow. "So let me get this straight," I said. "You all invited me back after 8 years, because Brielle needs funding for a baby-themed app, Silence. Then Dad spoke up, cheerful and clueless. We just thought, now that you're successful, maybe it's time we came together again. Build something. As a family. Right, I said. Family. The word tasted rotten in my mouth. No one said a word. They all just stared at me, some embarrassed, some expectant, waiting for me to pull out a checkbook or a smile or a long speech about how proud I was of everyone. Instead, I put my fork down. I came because Nate called. I said, not because I needed any of you. Not because I missed being ignored. And definitely not because I felt like bankrolling a startup I wasn't even told about until just now. Brielle's face froze. Her husband's smile slipped an inch. I'm not here to fix your problems. I continued. Not here to invest in your dreams. I built my own. Quietly. Without help. Mom opened her mouth. Closed it. I stood up. I hope it works out. I said, voice calm. But don't mistake my success for availability. I didn't get this far by being anyone's fallback plan. I walked out of the room. And this time, I didn't wait for applause. After dinner, we moved into the living room for gifts. It was all as forced and awkward as you'd expect. Brielle sat like a queen under the tree, surrounded by pastel-colored bags and shiny boxes. Her husband passed out presents while relatives oohed and awed over baby onesies and scented candles. The air was thick with polite joy. I sat off to the side, on the same recliner they told me I'd be sleeping on, a little too close to the drafty window, like they wanted to keep me half in, half out. I reached into my duffel bag and pulled out a few modestly wrapped packages. Nothing flashy, just thoughtful, high-quality things I'd picked up over the past month. A leather briefcase for Dad, engraved initials. Noise-canceling headphones for Mom, not the cheap kind. And a massage voucher for Brielle. Pregnancy looked like it was weighing on her, and I figured even she didn't deserve constant back pain. I handed them out quietly. No big moment. No expectation of gratitude. Wow, Dad said, flipping open the briefcase. Didn't know they still made these this nice. They do, I said. Mom slid the headphones out of the box, looked confused, then forced a smile. Thank you, she said, like it physically hurt her to say the words. Brielle raised an eyebrow at her massage voucher. Is this like a real place? It's not a scam if that's what you're asking. She let out a short laugh. Okay, thanks. Then, the room shifted. It was time for me. I knew because everyone sort of looked around, like, oh, right, him. Mom spoke first. Oh, we forgot. I blinked. Sorry. Your gift, she said quickly, waving a hand. We meant to grab something, but things got so hectic with the baby and the dinner and all. Brielle smirked. Don't cry again, she said under her breath. I didn't. I just reached into the pocket of my coat and pulled out a small box. Set it on the coffee table. What's that? Dad asked. I leaned back. Keys. The room fell still. To what? Mom said, sitting up. My duplex, I said. Closed on it last week. Dead silence. You bought a house? Brielle asked. Like I had said I bought the moon. A duplex, I corrected. 3-bedroom up top, 2-bedroom on the bottom. Hoboken. Walkable to the path. Quiet block. Dad's mouth opened slightly. With what money? I shrugged. The bonus from the system I designed. Closed a deal for a European bank. Security integration. 9-figure contract. His face changed. From confusion to something else, calculation. How much? Was the bonus? Mom asked, voice barely above a whisper. Post-tax? 138. They all stared at me like I'd just turned into someone else. You're kidding, Brielle said. I'm not. Suddenly, the room wasn't cold anymore. It was electric. Dad chuckled. Well, look at you, he said, like I had just finished mowing the lawn really well. Guess you finally figured it out. I didn't answer. Mom leaned forward. That's really impressive. I could see it. The shift. The subtle way they started to reframe me. Not as the failure. Not even as the invisible one. But as something useful. Money had a funny way of making people notice what they ignored before. But I saw it for what it was. The keys weren't the surprise. They were the test. And they failed it in real time. I started packing my duffel as soon as dessert ended. I wasn't staying. Not after that circus. The recliner they offered me was still half covered in wrapping paper and empty plates. Nobody made a move to clear it. As I zipped my bag, I heard footsteps behind me. Heavy ones. Dad. I didn't turn around. Before you go, he said, clearing his throat, there's something we wanted to ask. I waited. He shifted from foot to foot like a kid caught sneaking out. About Brielle's startup. Of course. I turned around slowly. She's really onto something, he said. That app idea. It's smart. Practical. And it'd mean a lot if we could get some support from family. I said nothing. Then Brielle appeared behind him, arms folded over her belly, smiling like she was about to hand me a gift. It's a once-in-a-lifetime investment, she said. We already have interest from a few local moms and a developer lined up. We just need that initial push. How much? I asked. Her smile didn't waver. $250. I nodded. Once? You want $250,000? Yes, she said. But it's an investment, not a handout. You'd get equity. And, obviously, we'd want you involved, since you're the tech guy. Tech guy. I almost laughed. Dad stepped in again. Think about it. You've done well for yourself. And now's your chance to help your sister like we've always helped each other. Like we've always helped each other. I repeated. Slowly. Brielle didn't blink. You're in a position to change lives. That's power. I looked at both of them, then said it. No. They blinked like I had spoken in a different language. No. Dad repeated. No. I said again. Calm. Even. Not angry. Just done. Brielle's smile cracked for the first time. You didn't even ask for details. I don't need to. Her voice sharpened. Why are you being difficult? Difficult, I said. Would have been asking you to pay back the money I spent on you over the years. This is boundaries. Dad stepped closer. Son, don't call me that. I cut in. He froze. You called me son when you wanted something. The rest of the time, I was just tall, or that boy who likes computers. I was invisible until I made 6 figures. Mom appeared in the hallway now, her eyes red and glossy. You're being selfish, she said. That word again. Really? I asked. Let's review. You didn't fund my college. You didn't visit when I was in the hospital with pneumonia. You didn't ask how I was doing for 8 years. I turned to Brielle. You mocked me every Christmas. You used my room as a nursery before I even walked in the door. And now you want nearly $250,000 like it's a favor I owe you. She opened her mouth, but I wasn't done. This is the part where I usually cave, I said. This is the part where you guilt me into believing I'm less than. So you can pretend you're more. I looked around at all of them, the whole performance. But I'm not that kid anymore. The one who had to prove he belonged. I don't need your permission, or your approval. Mom started crying, loud and sloppy. You're tearing this family apart, she said. After everything we did for you. You didn't do it for me, I said quietly. You did it in spite of me. And you were fine with me being gone until you saw a $sign next to my name. No one spoke. I zipped my duffel and slung it over my shoulder. You wanted a donor, I said as I walked toward the door. Not a brother. Then I opened it and stepped out into the cold night without looking back. By the time I hit the highway, my phone was already vibrating. Voicemail, missed call, text after text. From Brielle, from Mom, from numbers I didn't even have saved anymore. Cousins, old family friends, people who hadn't spoken to me in years suddenly found the time. How could you walk out like that? Your mother's in tears. You're heartless. She's pregnant, for God's sake. Every message was the same flavor of guilt, just stirred with a different spoon. I turned the phone off and tossed it into the glove box. The drive back to Hoboken was quiet, peaceful even. The farther I got from that house, the lighter I felt. Like I'd left a heavy winter coat behind, one I never chose to wear in the first place. I didn't go straight home. Instead, I pulled into the tiny parking lot behind my favorite dive bar. The one with the busted jukebox and the bartender who remembered my drink. Inside, it was warm and dim, full of mismatched chairs and real people. People who knew me for who I was, not for who they remembered or refused to remember. My friends were already there. Thought you might show up, Dev said, sliding a whiskey across the table. You look like someone who just survived a very polite hostage situation, Claire added, sipping her beer. I chuckled. You're not far off. I told them everything. Not in one big story, but in fragments. The rock bottom years. The silence. The sudden invite. The ask. Their faces said everything I needed to hear. Outrage, empathy, understanding. They don't deserve you, Dev said. They never did, Claire nodded. But you were hoping maybe they'd changed. Yeah, I said quietly. I think part of me always was. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Dev raised his glass. To chosen family, he said. We all clinked. That's when my phone, newly powered back on, buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number. No voicemail. Just a call. I didn't answer. Just turned the screen over, face down on the sticky wood table. You gonna check that? Claire asked. Nope. Because I already knew what it was. Maybe Dad. Maybe Brielle's husband. Maybe someone else trying to spin the whole thing into my fault. They always did that. Twisted the narrative just enough to make me look like the ungrateful one, the selfish one, the broken branch on the family tree. But not anymore. That was the twist they didn't see coming. Not that I had money. Not that I bought property or designed systems for global banks. No, the real surprise was that I stopped caring about their approval. The guilt they used to hang over my head like a chandelier? Gone. I finally saw it for what it was, a tool, a leash. And the second I stopped playing along, it lost its power. I stayed out that night longer than usual. Not because I was avoiding anything, but because I felt good. Free. When I finally got home, I tossed my bag onto the couch, kicked off my shoes, and turned off my phone again. I didn't need to hear more pleas. I didn't need explanations or justifications or forced apologies. What I needed, and what I had, was peace. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel bad about choosing it. 6 months later, I was sitting at a ramen place in the East Village, listening to a woman I'd just met rant about how she'd once been fired for not smiling enough during stand-ups. "Dead serious," she said, slurping noodles. Apparently, the lead developer thought my energy was a little cold. I was fixing their broken UX, not hosting a birthday party. I laughed, a real laugh, the kind I hadn't let out in years. Her name was Sophie, UI/UX lead for a health tech startup in Brooklyn. Funny, sharp, with a dry edge I liked immediately. We'd met at a mutual friend's game night and kept finding excuses to talk afterward. What surprised me most was how easy it was. She didn't ask about my family. She didn't fish for trauma or offer pity when I mentioned going no contact with my parents. She just nodded and said, "Yeah, I get that." And I think she did. She told me her own story one night over dumplings, parents who called her dramatic every time she cried, and who told her emotions made her weak. She didn't talk about it often, didn't have to. We both knew the language of quiet survival. We started seeing each other more. Ramen turned into weekends. Weekends into long walks, grocery trips, and sleepy mornings where she wore my hoodie and made the strongest coffee I've ever had in my life. Meanwhile, work took off. I got promoted to head of engineering for a defense client's AI rollout. Confidential stuff, highly regulated, stressful as hell, but I liked it. The pay was upper 1%. The equity deal? Coming next quarter. It was the kind of offer that made you sit in silence for a minute and rethink everything you thought was possible. When the email hit my inbox, I didn't tell anyone in my family. Didn't even consider it. I did get a text from my dad, though. Just one line. "Heard the news. Maybe you can finally help your sister." That was it. No congrats. No, how are you? Just a reminder that in his eyes, my success was only useful if it served her. I stared at the message for a second, then blocked the number. Again, that block list was getting long. But I didn't care. It wasn't bitterness anymore. It was clarity. Sophie and I spent that night curled up on my couch watching old 90s thrillers, eating popcorn straight out of the pot. She rested her head on my shoulder and said, "You're really different when you're not carrying the world." I thought about that. I had spent so many years being the backup plan, the emergency contact, the tech guy who could be tapped for money, favors, silence. But now, my life was mine. The duplex was fully furnished. I'd remodeled the upstairs bathroom with subway tile and matte black fixtures, the kind of thing my parents would have called unnecessary. The downstairs tenant paid most of the mortgage. My fridge had actual food. My nights had actual peace. And for once, I wasn't someone's fallback. I was someone's choice. I watched Sophie doze off mid-movie, her legs curled under her, her breath soft, and I realized something. They still wanted me to be the safety net, to be the trampoline they bounced on after every screw-up. Too bad I'd learned how to build my own. They could keep their nursery-turned-childhood bedroom. They could keep their stories about how I'd abandoned the family, because the only thing I'd walked away from was a lie. What I walked toward, that was everything. And I wasn't looking back. 1 year later, I stood barefoot on a freshly stained porch in Montclair, mug of coffee in hand, watching our dog chase squirrels across the yard. Sophie was inside making French toast, humming to a song I couldn't quite place. The house was small, but it was ours. Real hardwood floors. A porch swing I installed last fall. A kitchen where we actually cooked. A fridge covered in notes, receipts, and Polaroids that made the place feel lived in. It wasn't the house I grew up in. It was the house I chose to build a life in. We'd closed on it in the spring. Lowball offer, long escrow, and a little luck. I'd used some of my bonus as the down payment, and when we got the keys, Sophie cried in the driveway. Not dramatic. Just one soft tear that she wiped away with the back of her hand. "Feels weird," she'd said. "Having a home that feels like home." I knew exactly what she meant. A couple weeks later, I got a message from Sarah, one of my cousins. One of the few I hadn't blocked. "Heard about the house. It's beautiful. Just a heads up, they're still talking about you." I smiled as I read it, standing in the hallway next to her coat rack. Same hallway where Sophie had accidentally painted over a light switch and left it that way because it looked funny. "Talking about me how?" I typed back. "Mom says they think you're laundering money." She replied with a laughing emoji. They can't imagine success without their fingerprints on it. I laughed out loud. A short, surprised bark of a laugh. That was always the thing with them. If they couldn't control your story, they rewrote it. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. Instead, I posted a photo that night. Just our backyard. String lights overhead. Friends gathered around the grill. Sophie laughing mid-bite. Our dog sitting proudly in the middle of the chaos like he owned the place. Caption: You don't need blood to build belonging, just courage. And I'm in every word. I'd spent so much of my life thinking peace was something you earned by enduring, by pleasing, by proving. But peace doesn't come from being tolerated. It comes from choosing yourself, even when it makes people uncomfortable, especially then. Sometimes I still think about the last thing Brielle said to me before I walked out of that house. You're gonna regret this. She said it with her arms crossed and her chin lifted, like she was casting a spell. But she was wrong. I didn't lose a family that night. I found a life, a real one. I finished my coffee, whistled for the dog, and stepped inside to the smell of cinnamon and burnt toast. Sophie looked up from the stove and grinned. You're smiling, she said. What happened? I kissed the top of her head. Just remembering who I used to be, I said. And then I let it go, because I had somewhere better to be. Here, now, free.